Yes, the phone call that finalized Adidas' decision on October 25, 2022 ended the Yeezy partnership and detonated roughly $1 billion from Kanye West's paper fortune in an instant. According to Adidas' own release that day, the company terminated the deal with immediate effect, halted production, and warned investors of a major earnings hit. Within hours, Forbes recalculated Ye's net worth down to a fraction of what it had been because the Adidas contract was the pillar holding up his billionaire status. This is a story about how ego collided with brand risk and how one call, triggered by a month of public provocations and private pressure, vaporized a dynasty built on hype, scarcity, and a co-signed logo. 4 weeks before that decision, the common belief was simple: Adidas needed Yeezy more than Yeezy needed Adidas. Fans parroted the line that Ye was untouchable. He seemed to agree, even saying on a podcast that he could say anti-Semitic things and Adidas couldn't drop him. The math looked comforting to him. Yeezy had been generating billions in annual sales for Adidas and had become the template for Celebrity X sneaker collabs across the industry. If the partnership was a cash machine, why would Adidas walk away? Here's the reality you rarely hear. The second a partner creates reputational contagion, where one person's words force a multinational to defend its values to customers, employees, and investors, the clock starts ticking. And when the receipts stack up, public remarks, a runway stunt, social posts, and accelerating fallout, legal and PR teams start planning scenarios. The final straw is often invisible to the public and loud inside the company: a decision meeting, a unanimous vote, a call to council, a draft ready to file, and then the call that makes it official. That's the billion-dollar call. So what actually pushed Adidas from under review to we're done? The timeline tells on itself. On October 3, 2022, Ye wore a White Lives Matter shirt at his Paris show, turning a fashion moment into a culture war grenade. A few days later, his Instagram was restricted after he pushed an anti-Semitic trope in messages with another artist. The next night, locked out of Instagram, he tweeted that he was going DEFCON 3 on Jewish people. It wasn't just offensive, it made Adidas part of the story before any press release existed. 2 weeks later, in the now-removed Drink Champs episode, he dared a partner to act by describing himself as unsackable. That clip spread on every platform and, crucially, into boardrooms. The controversy wasn't a blip, it was compounding. Meanwhile, business partners were peeling off. Balenciaga publicly ended their relationship with him. Gap had already exited its Yeezy collaboration in September, and on October 25th it announced it would pull Yeezy products and shut down the dedicated site. His talent agency cut ties. Social media platforms were suspending and restricting his accounts. This matters for one reason: large brands don't like to be the last domino. Once other companies move, the reputational risk calculus shifts from wait it out to protect the corporate body. Adidas initially said it was reviewing the partnership. By October 25th, it pulled the plug, cited hate speech, stopped all payments, and asserted ownership of Yeezy designs under the contract. That's not a PR gesture, that's a legal end state. But why did Adidas' decision hit Ye's net worth like a financial meteor? Because that partnership wasn't just a revenue line, it was an asset multiplier. The Yeezy contract turned his ideas into manufactured product at global scale, then translated those sales into a valuation for future cash flows. Forbes had valued the Adidas stream at around $1.5 billion within his net worth calculation. Remove it, and the math collapses. Overnight, valuation models revert to what remains: music royalties, cash and properties, and a minority stake in another brand. Without Adidas, the licensing engine died, and with it the billionaire label. Listen to the language Adidas used when it terminated the partnership: with immediate effect, end production, stop all payments. In corporate risk management, those phrases are a firewall. They're designed to say to shareholders and employees, we acted decisively, the brand's values are intact, the financial impact is known and limited. Adidas even told investors to expect a short-term profit hit, hundreds of millions, because walking away had a price. That disclosure wasn't just about Q4 earnings, it was about credibility. You cannot claim to reject hate while quietly keeping a cash faucet open. In that context, the call that ended Yeezy was as much about proving brand integrity as it was about cutting loss. Now zoom into the I can't be dropped claim. When a celebrity publicly tests a partner's red line, they force a binary: enforce the line or lose it. The Drink Champs quote wasn't abstract, it was a dare. And dares create receipts. PR strategists call this escalation by performative impunity, the belief that previous success inoculates you from consequences. But legal teams hear something different. exposure. Every minute the company remains tied to fresh inflammatory statements, the greater the chance of lawsuits, employee walkouts, retailer backlash, and shareholder claims that management failed to mitigate a known risk. That's why, even if it took weeks of review, the decision, when it came fast and final. What about the argument that Adidas should have stuck it out because Yeezy sales were immense? Short-term revenue is not the only metric. Reputation has a price. Consider what happened in the days before the termination. Advocacy groups publicly pressed Adidas to act. Freeway overpasses displayed anti-Semitic banners invoking Ye's name. Boycott Adidas trended. That's not noise, it's contagion. Every hour of silence invited the narrative that Adidas tolerated hate to keep a profit center alive. When you're a global brand with a specific historical baggage to distance yourself from, the cost of inaction snowballs. The call that ended Yeezy wasn't just about shoes, it was about brand survival. There's also the contract reality. Adidas' termination language mentioned stopping payments and ending production, and it asserted that Adidas owned the design rights to existing Yeezy products and colorways. That clause, standard in many licensing deals, is the unglamorous backbone that keeps factories humming even when the face of the line disappears. It meant the company could shut off the pipeline without permission, manage inventory, and later decide how to dispose of it. In 2023 and 2024, Adidas would sell down leftover Yeezy stock and direct portions of the proceeds to anti-hate groups, signaling both fiscal stewardship and value alignment. But the instant consequence for Ye was absolute. The spigot of new royalty-bearing releases shut off. Another layer, the banking and retail ecosystem. In mid-October 2022, a letter from JP Morgan Chase surfaced showing the bank had already decided to end its relationship with his businesses weeks earlier. Major retailers distanced themselves from Yeezy products. Agencies cut him loose. Each of those moves shrank the practical runway for any pivot. You can design, post, and rant, but if banking, distribution, and retail choke, your monetization dies. That's why the "I can't be dropped" bravado was so off-key. The system can and did drop him in every direction, and the Adidas call made the collapse official. So, what was the specific trigger on Adidas' side? A pattern, not one sentence. The White Lives Matter spectacle in Paris set the stage. The DEFCON 3 tweet lit the fuse. The drink champs dare wave the red flag. Partners peeling off, and public pressure supplied the accelerant. Brands don't decide in a vacuum, they measure the trajectory. When the trajectory points to reputational freefall, governance requires a stop. That's why the very wording of the October 25th release reads like a line in the sand, not a negotiation, not a warning, a termination. Let's talk motives. Was this political? Commercial? Ethical? It was all three. Ethically, Adidas had to condemn explicit anti-Semitism. Commercially, it had to protect the franchise, the three stripes, across continents and categories. Politically, it had to respond to employees and the public in a way consistent with its own diversity and inclusion language. If any one of those imperatives had been missing, the calculus might have stretched longer. With all three aligned, the outcome was inevitable. The only question was timing. It came when the company could say it had reviewed, weighed, and acted in a way that would stand up to investors and, if necessary, in court. You might wonder, if he apologized later or tried to walk some statements back, could the call have been reversed? History says no. Once a listed company files an ad hoc release, stops payments, and revises guidance, reversing course would require extraordinary conditions and create fresh risk. And there was no sign of sustained contrition. Subsequent public comments only reinforced why corporate distance was non-negotiable. In that sense, the call didn't just close a chapter, it locked the door. Here's the financial punchline that most headlines miss. Ye's billionaire status wasn't a vault of cash. It was a valuation built on a licensing machine. The Adidas call didn't seize his money. It removed the assumption of future royalties at scale. When the licensing machine is unplugged, the spreadsheet that once called you a billionaire recalculates you into a wealthy artist entrepreneur with assets, yes, but without the engine that multiplies them. That's why the drop looked so sudden. The number was paper until the call made it real. One more uncomfortable truth. The same laws of brand physics that elevated Yeezy doomed it when the face of the brand turned radioactive. Scarcity drops and celebrity worship create outsized upside until they create outsized downside. By the end, Yeezy wasn't just a sneaker line, it was a referendum on a company's values. The second it became that, the partnership couldn't survive. In that moment, the billion-dollar phone call wasn't spite, it was governance. So what did we learn? First, untouchable is a myth. Second, brand partners are not your shield, they are your mirror. Third, money follows trust, and trust evaporates faster than any marketing campaign can replenish it. The public saw a headline. Inside the system, people heard a ring, a voice read a decision, and a contract died. That's how empires end in the age of brand risk. And here's the takeaway if you care about the industry playbook. Every collaborator watching that day learned where the red lines are and how quickly they become tripwires when you step on them twice. The next time a celebrity thinks they can dare a partner in public and still cash the check, they'll remember the call from Herza Janorik. They'll remember that one sentence in a press release can erase a decade of hype. And they'll remember that the bill for ego always comes due with interest. Outro. The call was real, the impact immediate, and the lesson simple. A partnership built on mutual benefit collapses the moment one party makes the other defend the indefensible. Adidas enforced its line, and evaluation evaporated. If you want the rest of the A-list playbook, the receipts, the reversals, the PR feints that save some careers and sink others, dive into the Fresh Celebrity Tea playlist next. It connects this collapse to the wider map of brand risk in 2022 and beyond.